Welcome to the program today. Mondo Gonzalez here in studio, and we're going to be discussing one of my favorite topics, and maybe it's a topic that you have heard about but haven't really had the time to look into, and that is Genesis chapter 6. It is completely fascinating. It is in the Bible. There's a lot of different perspectives on it, which we're going to discuss. Today, our guest is Doug Van Dorn. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Mondo.
So for our audience, kind of give a background. Where do you live? Not much your address or anything, but where do you live? What do you do? You're a pastor, and kind of introduce them how they can find more information about you.
Yeah, I'm a pastor in Colorado. I'm a native, one of the only two in the whole state, I think. Been pastoring for almost 22 years, the same church called the Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado. And I love it. Great congregation, great church.
Yeah, and Doug has been one of very few, whatever that is, who has climbed up all of the 14ers.
All the 14,000-foot peaks in Colorado.
How many are there?
54 of them. Well, that's what it used to be. They keep adding them. I made sure I climbed those back in the day, so that I knew that they would probably add them.
Yeah, what an amazing, I love mountain climbing and running in the mountains, but I don't live in Colorado, so I can't do that. So Genesis 6, you wrote the book, Giants, Sons of God, and to me this is, maybe you can describe it, but there's very few full books like this that are addressing the background, the text itself, what it means, and that are out there. I mean, truly superb. And this is the 10th anniversary edition. Kind of talk about how you came to really enjoy the topic originally, and then what you did in the updated version.
Yeah, it was through just kind of accidentally stumbling upon Dr. Heiser's work before Unseen Realm came out. So he had been known because he was on Coast to Coast and stuff like that, but I just stumbled upon him. And the whole thing of giants is really interesting. I think there's a lot more here than he wrote about. So that's why I decided just to take a deep dive in the subject. I mean, like you said, it's completely fascinating and interesting, so why not? And out came that book, and it's done pretty well. And so we decided to put out a 10th anniversary this year for it.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you're out there and you're in church and you go, what in the world? Giants, Genesis 6? Oftentimes, as a church member, I know for me, it wasn't really brought up, or many times there's different views, which we're going to talk about what that looks like. But Genesis 6 is extremely foundational. And when you look at the Bible and really the way that the book of Genesis is written, Genesis 1 through 11 clearly has many foundational things in it before in chapter 12 it gets into the story of Abraham and the story of Israel and everything else as it relates to the plan of redemption. So let's come to, if you will, most people, we try to say that our ministry is talking about things that you don't often hear on Sunday morning or at church,
right?
And which some of the interesting things. So Genesis 6, the typical view, I would say probably the predominant view out there is there's nothing there. It's non-supernatural. Give us kind of a background at how most often seminaries or other, the non-supernatural view, and maybe compare the two views for our audience.
Yeah, so the kind of the typical evangelical view that's been around since long before the Reformation. I mean, go back to Augustine, Chrysostom, they kind of popularized this Sethite theory, is what a lot of people call it, that what's going on here is that essentially Christians are marrying non-Christians. To put it in
believers and non-believers.
Terms.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so out of that comes giants, and like that never made any sense to me. But I mean, that's what everybody just teaches. It's just kind of that's what it is, and to even question it is like that's ridiculous to even question it. But I subsequently have learned that until those two great church fathers, who I love in a lot of ways, came along in about the turn of the 4th, 5th century. The entire church, the whole church, took the supernatural view, and they act as if that wasn't true. So something happened over the course of probably 50 years or whatever, that the older universal view just went out of style. Nobody talked about it, and it's like when they read it, they think that the only people that would ever believe this were Jews, and so they just start ridiculing it and mocking it.
Yeah, I think that's very important when you think about history and think about the traditions that all of us have, whether we're raised in church or not. I have found that I wasn't raised in church, but the things that you start learning, and especially the first few years, and they become very foundational to your thinking, and it's hard to overcome those and remove them. I also think too that when you when you look at whether it's Augustine, and others that take oftentimes an allegorical approach to Scripture, a very, very literal or straightforward hermeneutic, and they end up in a variety of ways in the typological sense. But the typical thing that we hear today is, it's the sons of Seth. I don't know why you don't get it. But you go, my response is, well, have you ever really looked at the text?
Right. Exactly.
Have you actually read it?
Exactly.
And tried to, and you do that in the book, which was superb. And you said, well, let's just examine.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the evidences, if you don't mind. And what is that typical view? You said Christians and non-Christians being married, but how do we respond to that?
Okay, so by just looking at the text itself, I think it's important to just begin reading it. So Genesis 6:1, when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, that word there is Adam, the Hebrew word Adam. Mm-hmm. That's very important. That's what the word is, okay? And it says, and daughters were born to them. To who? To man, to Adam. All right, so we keep reading. And then it says, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. So somehow, the sons of God, if men are having children, the sons of God are in counter to this. They're something else. Well, and of course, this fits what we know of everything else about what the sons of God are in the rest of the Old Testament with that phrase, and outside of the Old Testament even. I mean, the Canaanites were talked about this too, and they're always angelic beings. So I think it's really important to see that that man is having children, and the daughters of man, the word has not changed. But yet, in the Sethite view, the daughters of man suddenly becomes the daughters of Cain. And it's like, that's not what it says.
Not what it says.
And then the sons of God, that's Elohim. That's a word that refers to supernatural entities. Mm-hmm. And people put the word Seth in there, but it doesn't say the sons of Seth. It says the sons of God. And so what you're doing there is you're finding people actually changing the meaning of the word within less than a verse for absolutely no reason other than that they can't stomach what the text actually says. So then, that's kind of the first verse. And then when you come to the last verse here, verse 4, it's important to point out that what is being born there are these Nephilim. And so you have to look at what is a Nephilim. And there's been studies that go back to the 30s. Cyrus Gordon did a study on this word Nephilim and discovered that that word appears only two places in the Bible. This verse, 6:4, Genesis, and then Numbers 13:33. And in Numbers 13, it's actually spelled two different ways in one verse. And one of those ways can only be accounted for as an Aramaic word. And that Aramaic word we know means giant. And so when you go back and you read, for example, the Greek Septuagint translation of the Hebrew, it translates the word as giant. And so people think that Nephilim comes from this verb that means to fall, nephal. But it doesn't. It actually is a word that means giant. And it's an Aramaic word that came in later in order to help people understand who these people were.
Yeah, that's amazing too, because when you look, it's even in our world, it's so, these things are repeated. Oh, well, that's Nephal. And you're
right.
Like, well, no, it really isn't.
I mean, I think that there's a word play going on with Nephal, because these are fallen beings falling from heaven, but it's only a word play. The word actually means giant.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, no doubt that the angels here, in Job chapter 1, chapter 2, Job 38, the language is all there as it relates to angelic beings. The Septuagint calls them angels. So that's what I think is interesting. If you look at the original, I wouldn't say original, but the most ancient, whether it's Jews or even the church,
right?
They took a supernatural view here. And like you said, something happened there where they got away, whether it's allegorical hermeneutics or something else.
Well, I actually believe that it was quite nefarious, and people have not accounted for this. It started with the rabbis. Mm-hmm. And it started because there was this rabbi in Israel who was calling himself the Son of God and was claiming to be God, one with the Father. And so all these Jews were converting to Christianity because his name was Jesus. And so when their temple was destroyed in 70 AD and their religion started to crumble, because they couldn't make sacrifices and they were being spread throughout the world, the rabbis clamped down on the supernatural view that was the universal interpretation, according to everything that we know, of the Jews, and they changed it. to mean some sort of like a dynastic ruler or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And so that's a very evil thing to do. Yeah. And I don't think that the church itself with Chrysostom and Augustine changed that for a bad reason. I just think that over time, that worked its way into the Christian church and the way that they thought about it. And next thing you know, it's Sethites.
Yep, and it certainly seems to be less problematic in trying to understand. Well, wait, because if you start talking about angels with women, it brings up a whole other area of question.
Sure, it does.
You know, it does. So, well, we're going to take a little break here right now, where you can see how to get our magazine. These are topics that we love to discuss. We love to do biblical topics in the magazine as well. So take a listen.
10 years ago, we began an exciting journey, a mission dedicated to spreading the good news of the soon return of Jesus. Our passion for teaching Bible prophecy is what drives us to warn the world of events that are soon to come. In the last 2 years, tens of thousands of prophecy watchers from all over the world have subscribed to our monthly magazine, The Prophecy Watcher. Our first Too Good to Be True offer came with 8 bonus DVDs. Our second offer came with 10 bonus DVDs. But our 10-year anniversary offer is even better. 12 DVDs on Bible prophecy can be yours when you subscribe to our 48-page full-color magazine for just 1 year, print or digital format, all for a gift of $50, with shipping included in the USA. Recent events have turned the world upside down. The COVID-19 pandemic was followed by Russia's war in Ukraine, all overshadowed by the horrific October 7th tragedy in Israel. The prophets of the Bible predicted a series of end-time wars, and we're seeing the final pieces of the puzzle fall into place. Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Turkey. The enemies of Israel are on the doorstep, just as the Bible predicted some 2,500 years ago. The Prophecy Watcher magazine includes the writings of dozens of prophecy experts like Gary Stearman, Mondo Gonzalez, L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Josh Peck, and many others, writing on fascinating subjects like the Rapture, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Red Heifer, the World Economic Forum, the Global Reset, digital currency, the Mark of the Beast, the Nephilim, and the Antichrist's beast system of global control, things you will likely never hear about in church. 12 bonus DVDs will introduce you to Ezekiel's Gog and Magog war and the road to Armageddon. We'll examine the supernatural side of the Bible as we investigate controversial issues like the Nephilim, government UFO cover-ups, and the Shroud of Turin. We'll address the Luciferian Rebellion, a mutiny that changed heaven and earth forever. Speaking of heaven, you'll enjoy Mondo's glimpse into God's creation as he explores the stunning beauty of the stars and galaxies, seen through the lens of our Psalm 19 observatory cameras. 12 issues of the magazine, plus 12 bonus DVDs, a $180 value, now available for your gift of $50 to support our worldwide television outreach. Care to become a fellow Prophecy Watcher? Just visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. Partner with us today and help us take the message of the soon return of Jesus to the whole world.
Well, welcome back, and I do hope you get our magazine. It's color, it's beautiful, as you saw. It's an amazing opportunity. So, what we're doing here is we're talking about Genesis 6 and its importance in the Bible. It's right there. It's foundational in Genesis 6. When it comes to I guess the question, I'm asking you to read Moses' mind, or maybe God's mind, or the Holy Spirit's mind here as much as possible. Why do you think God included this in the Bible as a foundational thing? And then how does it kind of lay a flavor, a biblical flavor, to when we come to Jesus and the Gospels and his mission? That's kind of a big thing. I know you address it, but kind of give us a sampling of.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the overview of that for me would just be go back to Genesis 3:15. So three chapters earlier, there's this war that's promised between the seed of the woman and the serpent. And so this is there as kind of just a token. I don't think that, my view is that the reason why we only have 4 verses instead of several chapters like you find in Enoch or Jubilees or something is because everybody knew the story. You didn't need to retell the story. Just go read it. I mean, everybody knew it. And so this tells you why there was a flood, first of all, but then it continues that seed story. So when Noah comes off the ark, God makes a new covenant with him, and it's actually a covenant with his seed. And so every covenant in the Old Testament is a seed covenant, which is really interesting, going back to Genesis 3:15. And what that means, read in relation to the war is that the seed of the woman is being traced through Noah, then Abraham, and then Moses in a kind of a little bit more spiritual sense, because it's really Judah, but then David. Mm-hmm. And every time that you find these guys, they're fighting giants. Well, why? Well, because that's the war. Yeah. And so by the time you get to the New Testament and the seed of the woman finally comes through Mary, and we learn that her lineage, and probably in my view with Luke and Matthew's genealogies, is talking about both of her grandparents' lineage. Mm-hmm. And so she's fully human. There's no mixing of bloodlines here. And so Jesus is born of the seed of the woman, Mary, going back to Eve. And then this seed of the serpent now transforms from a kind of a physical presence with actual physical beings that they're fighting like Goliath
with the sword,
with the sword, mm-hmm. because it transformed to the spiritual realm, not to spiritualize the text, but because when a giant dies, everybody in the ancient world believes that they become a demon. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus, people need to ask themselves the question, like, why are all there these demons in the Gospels, but we don't read about it in the Old Testament? Well, this is the reason why. Because at this point in time, they've all been lost their bodies. Now they're in the New Testament haunting and possessing people, and Jesus is casting them out, showing that he is the Son of God. That's their favorite title for him. They're like the only ones that know who he is, which is kind of funny. So his fighting of this war is the continuation of the whole giant storyline. So it's actually why I called the book a biblical theology. You're just doing giants from Genesis to Revelation.
To me, it's extremely fascinating where, as Doug mentioned, you're reading the Old Testament and you're like, yeah, there's a spirit here, tormenting Saul, but you don't really get a lot of it. And then you go to the book of Matthew, and all of a sudden, you're like, it seems like there's a demon on every other page here. Yeah, you're like, what in the world? What is going on here? It's very unique, but it's as if the hounds of Satan, in the sense of Matthew 12 calls him the prince of demons. I don't think he's a demon himself, but he's still the leader of them. Sure. So he's taken them wherever they were from, around the world, but it's like, hey, we're going to centralize here to oppose the earthly mission of Jesus in the Gospels.
Right. And at that point, Jesus actually talks about how he binds the strong man. And so that's language that shows his superiority and his pillaging of that kingdom. So when Jesus is casting out demons and binding the strong man, those two things are one and the same. He's showing his superiority, and he's kind of dethroning Satan, if you will. I think there's different events in his ministry that are doing that in different ways. But then when you come to the cross and he dies, and the covenant that was proclaimed to him earlier, I think at the transfiguration, the baptism, now it's cut in his blood. And so now something legal takes place that did not happen before that he now is able to literally go down and descend to the place of the dead and storm the gates of hell and take the keys of the kingdom. Yeah. And the church ever since, and this is what the book of Acts and all the way through the rest of the New Testament is about, is that we're now storming the gates of hell. Mm-hmm. And this is the continuation of that seed war.
It is amazing, kind of the three-dimensional aspect now. If you understand Genesis 6, which is, again, all the different things you went through, and we'll talk about this in a different program, all the hierarchy of in all the beings that are non-human. I want to talk about that later too, because I think that's extremely fun to do. But you come on the scene, Jesus comes on the scene, and it's like, okay, I'm here. And it's the fascinating thing is he tells them to be quiet, but they said, we know who you are.
Right. And
they have titles for him, and which is, again, shows you the knowledge that they have, and of the war itself, and of his position, if you want to say in the divine council, as the leader. They know exactly who he is.
Have you come here to torment us before the appointed time, Jesus?
Exactly. And even their fear of him, don't send us to the abyss, you know. So,
which, by the way, is one of the funniest stories in the Bible, because they're like, send us in the pigs. And he goes, okay, I'll send you the pigs, the unclean pigs. And then the pigs run into the lake, and they end up in the very same place they would have.
Exactly. It's pretty amazing. So we're going to take a little break here where you can see how to get Doug's very thorough book. If you ever wanted to say, I've been interested in this, This book from beginning to end will help you. It's not too dense to not be understood, but if you want to go as deep as you want, he gives you the opportunity to do that. But when you get done with this, you'll understand, again, this biblical idea, this biblical theological view of ultimately what Gary has talked about for a long time, the seed war of Genesis 3:15, and how it comes to the fullness of Jesus and his mission on the cross. So take a listen.
Over the years, the Prophecy Watchers have explored the most controversial chapter in the Bible, the 6th chapter of Genesis. Gary Stearman once said that it is impossible to fully understand the Bible unless you are able to grasp the message God gave to Moses, included in this fascinating chapter. It exposes one of the main themes of the Bible, the Luciferian rebellion in the ancient past that led to what we call the seed war of Genesis 3:15. This Genesis 6 rebellion created a hybrid race of giants, the Nephilim, and it had one ultimate goal: corrupt the bloodline of Jesus, the Jewish Messiah. Many books have been written on the subject, but none as complete as Doug Van Dorn's recent effort. Tracing these giants back through history, he takes the readers places few have explored. From the writings in the Book of Jasher to the cannibalism of the giants and the writings in the apocryphal Book of Enoch, Van Dorn has written what may be the most comprehensive book ever written on the subject. Doug's 385-page book is available for your gift of $30 or more to support the worldwide television ministry of Prophecy Watchers. Your gift will help us continue to share the message of the Lord's soon return with the lost world. We also have a special package that will help you become an expert on the subject. The Sons of God package includes Doug's new book, Giants, a 2-DVD set on the Book of Enoch featuring Gary Stearman and Ken Johnson, and 2 bonus DVDs from Gary. It's all about the seed and footprints of the Nephilim. Many people describe these 2 DVDs as the most complete messages on the subject they've ever heard, full of little-known facts. Get the book for $30 or more, or get the Sons of God package for your gift of $50 or more. Just call the toll-free number on your screen 24/7, or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. As always, every order within the United States comes with free shipping and a special bonus to say thank you for your support. For our international friends, please note that additional shipping fees will apply and all prices quoted are in US dollars. Thanks for tuning in today. Join us next week for more fascinating interviews from the pages of the Bible.
Well, welcome back, and I absolutely hope you do get Doug's book. It's going to have a place of honor on my shelf because of the depth that he does and the background that he goes into and the opportunity to see, again, so much other research. So in one sense, okay, you're a pastor, I was a pastor. So the average person, they're just trying to raise their kids. They're just trying to live for the Lord. They're trying to pay their bills. They're trying to walk in faith. They're learning some of the foundations. They're not theologians in that sense. What does this book, how does this book help them? How is it relevant to them? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, this is something I've thought a lot about. I write about it a little bit in the book. My mind has, I think, gone a little deeper on my answer to this over the last few years. And so I'll give you 2 things to think about for this. The first one is how much we have been influenced with naturalism and materialism and rationalism, all these isms from the 18th, 19th centuries, and we don't even understand it. We don't even realize it. We are materialists through and through as Christians, and we need to stop being that way. And this worldview can completely change your outlook on the world so that I look at it as moving from 2D to 3D or black and white to color. It's not like it's going to change anything that you understand, but it will enhance it and it will expand it in ways that you can't even possibly imagine. The second thing is that I think that we've also been influenced by pragmatism and utilitarianism. In other words that communicate, if it's not something I can apply to my life, then it's not relevant to me. But I want to challenge people to think a little bit different about this. And that is, why do you go see The Lord of the Rings as a movie? Why would you do that? Not because it's pragmatic to your life, but because you need a story in your life. And that gives you a storyline in your life. And people are starving for a biblical narrative storyline that tells them why I'm here, what is going on around me that's so crazy, how can I possibly understand this? And the supernatural storyline, and the giants is just one way to do it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, but giants is kind of one way that I've thought about it. And it gives you a narrative to live your life through. Which is something that we all understand the need for. Every time we watch a movie or a TV show, we understand that felt need deep in our being, but we may not be able to articulate it. But when you come out of something that has changed you at that deep level, you recognize it. And I think grasping this storyline is something that can do that for anybody.
We all connect with movies, and these movies that impact us emotionally, even socially and other things. To me, it's amazing. C.S. Lewis, he talked a lot about myths, but he said this is, and he used it differently because he's a literary guy, but nevertheless, Christianity is the myth that is true.
The myth that is true, right?
Yeah. So it's amazing. And now what we're talking about here, myth, it's not that it's untrue, but the way that literary people use it is a story. It's a storyline. It's a grand story. But here is a story now that we're adding other dimensions, that the Bible's always been there in the Bible. And now we're adding it to this three-dimensional, and it connects with us. So, on that note, connect people with really the gospel here. Connect them with the gospel as we end the program.
Yeah, so that's the climax of the story. Jesus dies on the cross. And, his death on the cross as a satisfaction and an atonement for my sin, very theological ideas, are all completely true and absolutely necessary for people to understand. But it's more than that. Jesus also defeated the devil at the cross and crushed the serpent's head. And in a legal sense, he has lost his authority over the nations, so that if somebody is proclaiming the gospel and they hear the truth about who Jesus is, Satan does not have the legal right to hold them in bondage, and they can be free of whatever it is that they've been held bondage to. That's the good news of Jesus and what he's done. And the fact that he has been raised from the dead shows his power, Paul says, as the Son of God, which is language right out of the sons of God. And then his ascension shows that he is now at the right hand of all power and authority in heaven and in earth. And that's the good news that people are starving for, and it climaxes there at the first coming.
Amen. Doug, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mondo. It always goes too fast.
Yeah, it really does. And we appreciate you watching today. Again, it comes back to the gospel. Genesis 3 all the way through Genesis 6 to the gospel message. And this is exactly why we're here. So appreciate your prayers for our ministry. Ask you to continue to do that. Appreciate you watching this week, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody.